Today on Marketing Mavericks, we talk about collaborative economy, how sharing is the new buying, and how big companies are adapting. Coming up next.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Marketing Mavericks is provided by CashFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This episode is brought to you by Squarespace. Squarespace recently launched the latest version of their platform, Squarespace 7, which has a completely redesigned interface, integrations with Getty Images and Google Apps, new templates, and an incredible feature called Cover Pages. Try the new Squarespace at squarespace.com and enter offer code MM at checkout to get 10% off. And by FreshBooks, the #1 accounting solution that helps millions of entrepreneurs and small business owners save time billing and get paid faster. Try it at freshbooks.com/MM and join over 5 million users running their business hassle-free. Welcome to Marketing Mavericks, where we talk about everything at the intersection of marketing and technology. And today we're going to drill down on this idea of sharing economy, crowdsourcing, and how people are working with other people rather than owning businesses and working with companies. And it's a very exciting change in our economy and how we do business. Our guest today is the leading expert in this space. No doubt, he's always been at the forefront of marketing. There he is, Jeremiah Owyang. Owyang, how's it going?
It's going well. Hi, Tonya. Thanks for having me.
You are the founder of crowdcompanies.com, correct?
Yeah, I am.
And Jowyang on Twitter if you want to follow along with the show. So when we first met, you were leading marketing, and you worked with a good friend of Brian Salas and some other people, being at the forefront of what social media was changing business and how people were sharing. And then suddenly you decided to start up another business, started traveling globally even more than before. And I've been dying to have you on Marketing Mavericks and interview you. I don't even think I had you. I don't think I ever interviewed before I got to Twit either. I think we just never connected. It never worked out.
What a shame. What a shame. Well, I'm glad to be here now.
Likewise. Well, I'm glad to have you here. So this is an interesting topic, not just to everyone. Marketers are interested in it. It's something that we're all still trying to understand. And that's just a space of the sharing economy, or as your company's called, as crowd companies. First off, just help us understand, what is crowd companies? What do you do?
Yes, Crowd Companies is an association for Fortune 500 business leaders. Much in the spirit like Marketing Profs or WOMA or socialmedia.org. We took inspiration from those business models. So this is just an area where big corporations, and when you scroll down just a little bit more, you'll see who some of our members are, go down more. A lot of big companies. There's 45 companies that are part of the council. They're all Fortune 500, and we have events, online education, and we help them connect to startups. And the 45 joined, and we celebrate our 1-year anniversary next month. So pretty fast growth.
Congratulations. I know we have some mutual friends who are in the space who are heads of marketing and that sort of thing. And so if you're listening to the show and you're only listening to it on audio, that was Jeremiah's website with the different companies that he works with. If you want to get an idea of who's actually at the forefront of business in the space, who's trying to figure out how to become a sharing. You have some really big brands on there too, by the way. Some companies that you might not expect, like, I don't know, Visa or Verizon, Nestle, FedEx. I mean, these are so many. Walmart, Coca-Cola, for example. I know you've talked about Coca-Cola in the past, and they always try to be an innovator in marketing, but there's some others on here that you wouldn't necessarily expect. And I guess I want to find out, how it's explained to them and how they understand this idea of a sharing economy. And is there a difference in crowdsourcing and sharing? And what is crowdsourcing? First, let's start there.
Yeah, well, let's start with some definitions and lay it down. So crowdsourcing, as we know it, is typically when a company or individual or an organization outsources work to be done by the crowd. And that's been going on for many, many years. But recently, with the rise of mobile devices, Tonya, and the Internet of Things and mobile apps, we've seen some new changes where marketplaces are becoming more localized. Uber and Lyft are for that example. And also with social networks, which has really been that first phase when people created media and shared it, that was the precursor. So social media was the last 10 years. And when I was looking around on the research that I was doing in social, I saw that the market was maturing. All the startups went IPO. There's been massive acquisitions by Oracle, Salesforce, and Adobe. So I looked around and said, what's next? So the next phase is when people create the physical world, physical goods, and then they're sharing them. And this is what we call this collaborative economy. They may crowdfund new products, they may build products with the maker movement, and then they share the assets that they already have with each other. Homes, cars, money, time. Now, this means that people are getting what they need from each other, Tonya, peer to peer. If you thought social media was disruptive, you haven't seen anything yet. This is the most disruptive thing we've seen in business ever.
It's interesting that you say it in that way. When social media first started, I'm going to use the little quote signs here. When social media started, we referred to it as the time where we used to communicate over the back fence, and we used to have conversations at the bank, and how we communicated became online. We talked more. We shared more than we did for many years. As marketers, we did things differently. I see the sharing economy as being like, again, going back in time when, we said, hey, I want to share my my harvest with you. And, people were actually sharing versus going actually to a grocery store and buying products and goods. It's literally a change in commerce in general. And you mentioned the different areas like money, and, we've had Patrick Byrne with Overstock.com come in and talk about, cryptocurrency and how money's changing, and how I think it's a big topic for everybody to wrap their heads around. And I would think as marketers, it's a really big challenge to understand, how do you market in a space like this? So
sure.
How do you approach businesses who are saying, with this gigantic question mark, how do they take their current business model and move into some sort of sharing market space?
Sure, and I want to just recap that this movement's more than sharing. It's people are making their own goods in the maker movement, and they're crowdfunding, and it's impacting all these different spaces. I think the best way to illustrate this collaborative economy, which is comprehensive of all those things I just said, is for people to take a look at the collaborative economy honeycomb. And if you have the opportunity to get in front of a computer, or you're watching this live stream, you can just Google collaborative economy honeycomb, and you'll find this graphic. Now, I'll do a quick tour, and I'll make sure that I'll make it that it's audio for people to really hear it. So there's 6 hexagons here that represent the industries that are being impacted now. On the top right, there's goods. People are creating their own goods in the maker movement. And then there's new business models where people are loaning products, and then people are sharing used goods. I'm sure you've heard of eBay, but even the loaning products. So I have a young daughter, and instead of buying her toys, we were getting them on demand on Play, Pley. Why own Duplos, Legos, when she's going to outgrow them? So now for $25 a month, I can have these actually sent to me. And for the ladies, if you want to have access to an unlimited closet, there's 99 Dresses, Rent the Runway. Now you can get these things, or Threadflip. There's many places that you can get these goods. On the next area, even food is being impacted in the green hexagon to the right. We're seeing people turn their own home kitchens into restaurants. You can go over to a stranger's house and get food, and that's on Cookening and Feastly. And you can get an authentic meal, like Peruvian food from somebody who's from Peru. You're never going to get that quality or that warmth and that natural human connection that at a restaurant. And then in the services space, we see people sharing their time. So people are delivering food to each other on Instacart or shipping for people. There's even medical marijuana delivery in San Francisco. And then there's business services as well. And this is what is traditionally known as crowdsourcing, Odesk, Elance, Freelancer. On the transportation segment, we're on number 4 out of 6 here, is people are sharing their vehicles with each other. Get around, relay rides, enable people to share their cars. Boat-bound people share their boats because they're not used that often. Both of these things are sitting idle. And then there's rides as a service. You've heard of Sidecar, Lyft, BlaBlaCar, and then Halo, and even Uber, of course. And then the next one is physical space. People are sharing their closets like on Roost or homes on Airbnb. By the way, Airbnb is starting to bypass traditional hotels with number of rooms booked and even revenues.
I know, it's amazing. I want to talk about that too in a second.
Right, and so is Uber. By the way, BlaBlaCar has more riders in Europe than Eurostar, the heavy rail for passengers. Let's go back to space. People are sharing their office space as well. So people are sharing and renting it out to each other. So the last one is money. And there's 3 things happening here. The crowd is creating their own currencies, Bitcoin, Litecoin. And the crowd is sharing their money with each other on Lending Club. This is called peer-to-peer lending instead of going to a bank. And lastly, and tying everything back together, is people are funding new products and crowdfunding, which is why it's adjacent to the maker movement where people are creating goods. So zooming back, goods, food, services, transportation, space, money. This is a peer-to-peer economy. People are getting what they need from each other from mobile devices. This is the most powerful disruption that we've ever seen in business because the people formerly known as customers are competitors.
Exactly. And, I think this actually is a really good chart, by the way. It's good for people to look at and go to your website. And we'll have links to that on my page. And we'll be tweeting about this for the show. So this is an idea around different groups. And so wherever you think your business or your need falls, you could go into this. So this is actually the sharing piece, right? So a lot of these, we talked about, let's just go back to transportation and the fact that you've got Lyft and Uber, which, there's all kinds of drama. And I want to get into some of the legal and political and regulatory issues. But first, I want to say that this is something that I know in this area, certainly in the San Francisco Bay Area, is incredibly popular, but it's all over, right? It's also in Europe, and there's been lots of support as well as controversy around it. And, as consumers, we're excited to have options, and we feel like it's less expensive, but we also think, well, are we going to be protected in the same way? I mean, you hear stories all the time where consumers aren't protected. So how does a business like this who isn't regulated, how as consumers, how do we know these are safe?
Well, one thing that's happening, I'm going to quote Brian Chesky, the CEO of Airbnb, and he says trust has been democratized. So in the past, we relied on logos created by marketers as a trust mark. And now we're seeing that trust is digitized in ratings and reviews. Airbnb uses Facebook Connect, so you can see which one of your friends has stayed with a stranger. And then there's also other forms of insurance programs and some mild background checks, although I wouldn't say they're very rigorous. So in all of those cases, those 4 things, trust is being democratized to the startups so people can enable peer-to-peer. Tonya, I like what you really said. Like, this isn't new. This is what neighbors have done, sharing their harvest with each other. And I spoke with an Iowa insurance company as a co-op last year. And they said, Jeremiah, we like what you're doing, but it's not that new. Here in the Midwest, we've been doing the collaborative economy for 400 years. It's called being a good neighbor. And I'm sure the Europeans would say we've been doing it for 4 millennia. Now, the difference is, Tonya, is that now with technology, we can be good neighbors to strangers. Mobile apps, social networks enable this.
You're listening to my conversation with Jeremiah Owyang. And we're going to talk more about the sharing economy. But before we do, I want to thank a sponsor of Marketing Mavericks, which is Squarespace.com. Squarespace recently launched the latest version of their platform, Squarespace 7, which has a completely redesigned interface that makes getting started with your unique web presence easier. It has completely changed the interface, now simpler to navigate and operate in one seamless experience. They've also added e-commerce, which is available for all subscription plan levels. That's so important. And it includes the ability to accept donations, which is great for nonprofits, cash wedding registries. Are you getting married? Well, it's good for you. Or maybe your kid's in school and they need to raise money for a fund drive. It's so inexpensive. It starts at just $8 a month and includes a free domain name if you sign up for 1 year. Hosting is also included. Squarespace takes care of the hosting, basically, so you don't have to. Start a free 2-week trial with no credit card required and start building your website. When you decide to sign up for Squarespace, make sure to use the offer code MM to get 10% off and to show your support of Marketing Mavericks. And to begin using Squarespace 7, existing customers should go to the Settings tab to activate all the new features. We thank Squarespace for their support of Marketing Mavericks. Squarespace, start here and go anywhere. Thank you, Squarespace, for your support of Marketing Mavericks. Now with more of our conversation with Jeremiah Owyang. Recently, a good friend of mine and is yours as well, I believe, Jonathan Mendenhall, they had an ad for Airbnb that was really popular. And I think it's interesting to talk about how we market and try to reach people in this environment, because it's all about how we feel about something and how things are changing. And the video, I don't know if we're going to be able to show it, but is the
Berlin Wall one.
Link to it's about the Berlin Wall and how times have changed. And I think that makes people feel really excited and warm and fuzzy about this space, right?
Yeah, and I love what John did with the logo, the Airbnb logo, as controversial as the image is. But the story is belong anywhere, and the short word is BELO. So instead of being a tourist, you're now a traveler staying at a friend's house who you haven't met. That's really how they're positioning their brand. Let me say that again. You're no longer a tourist. You're a visitor, a traveler, staying at a friend's home who you haven't met. That's really what their brand is about. And this means that you can be like a local. You can have an authentic experience. It's not a standardized hotel. Same thing with Feastly. It's this really unique thing. Uber, on the other hand, I don't know if you have a chauffeur full-time working for you. I don't. But now you have that unique experience where you can have a town car pick you up at any given time. And so all of these services are providing that more human, authentic, localized experience that traditional brands really haven't. And Tonya, thinking bigger, 100 years ago, this is upsetting what is known as the Industrial Revolution, where we standardize products at mass volume. Now through technology, through Facebook, Google, and Apple technologies, it's reverting back to this localized village at scale. What do you think?
I think it is exactly what it looks like. And I think as generations are changing and how we use the internet and how we consume things and how we make decisions about our life and our lifestyle, we're seeing younger and younger, like the millennials, really understand and grasp this idea that they don't have to buy products in the way that they bought products before. They don't have to live a life. And I think we started seeing that. I think some of the first evolution of this, in my opinion, was office sharing, right? Small businesses, sharing offices. And I remember seeing this long before social media, but yet that's something that's even more and more popular. And many businesses that I know that are successful, it's not just a one-man, or one-woman shop. This idea of sharing office space is a very, very common thing. And you don't have to rent space in a building that's just yours or build a building.
4-year lease, right?
Yeah. And I think that makes us, in general, we do share more about our business, and we are sitting next to somebody who might not be in the same industry, but we're sharing ideas. And I think that's part of how this evolution started. And I think it's also about the small business, right? It's also about, instead of big corporations, and I have no issues with big corporations. It's just, I think we as consumers are 90% of the business we give anyway is in town. 90% of the businesses that exist are small business. So how is this affecting big business and big corporations? Are they open to this idea? I mean, I think I know the answer to that based on some stuff that I know you've done, but talk about how businesses are embracing it, the big corporations.
There's three types of companies. One is a company that ignores it. And I think that's very dangerous. So the taxi industry laughed at Uber and Lyft and said those are scabs. I don't know if you've seen the graphs out there on the data from the SF Transit Authority, but the taxis have lost 65% of their ridership in just about 3 years through simple apps. There was a study by Boston University that found that for every 1% rise of Airbnb, 0.05% of that would be a loss to hotels. So it's only 1/20th. But the growth of Airbnb looks just like that. It's a rocket directly upwards. So you can see that trend. And these companies are just 3 or 4 years old. So the other type of company, the third type of company who doesn't see it as a disruption, sees it as an opportunity. And these are big companies that are changing their business models to partner with the crowd. And we actually have a mission at Crowd Companies. And our mission is empowered people and resilient brands for shared value. It's actually a formula. So let me give you some examples of what companies are doing. Disclosure, some of these are our members, our paying members. So GE sources new ideas from makers using a startup called Quirky, and they actually share the IP and the resources in manufacturing with that maker, and then the rewards, the revenues are shared. Another example, Whole Foods saw that Instacart delivery folks were delivering food from their actual stores to people's homes. So instead of combating or fighting with it, they partnered with it and shared some of their supply chain, gave them dedicated areas in their store for pickup and coolers. So now they partnered with the crowd. It's a crowd company. And even banks are getting in on this as well. Barclays Card created a website where their members could actually design the financial products. And this is called the Barclays Card Ring, where millennials were designing the product and they were getting to use it. And they also got to share some of the revenues and share it with their favorite nonprofits. So in all three of those examples, GE, Whole Foods, Barclays Card, the people and brands are partnering together. It's a new type of relationship that we've ever seen. So one of the things in the Crowd Companies Council is that I don't encourage, actually I say members, and these are the executives from the top corporations in the world, you're not allowed to use the word consumer in the council. You cannot use the word consumer. Come up with a better word, because these people are partners or allies. They're makers. They're turning their homes into hotels. They're micro entrepreneurs. And so the term that we generally use is empowered people. It's a different class of person. Don't call them consumers. What do you think?
I think that the language is important, definitely. I think the way we refer to people, I've worked with retention and loyalty programs for a really long time and traditional business and trying to keep customers and keep them excited. How are big businesses migrating this idea to keep people, as a part of their company versus maybe some smaller business who's, sharing? How are the big companies saying, stay with us, and this is how we're going to do it through maybe some sort of sharing technology?
That's right. So thinking back for 20 years ago, we saw the rise of the internet by regular people, and then brands got on board. In 2004, we saw the Facebook.com emerge when anybody could create media and share it. And then we saw the brands jump on. We even see brands replicating and creating their own versions of Facebook on their .com. Sephora has Beauty Talk, their own branded community for people who love beauty. So fast forward to today, corporations are adopting the same technologies and strategies as we've seen in the last two phases, where I've been tracking my whole career, each of these three phases. And now they're enabling people to create the products on their behalf. So Tonya, you know social media space very well and marketing as a strategic mindset. So remember, in social media, it's listen and engage. Remember that? And then we also said, let's let the bloggers have our voice. We don't control the brand, right? Let's let them share our content from our website. Let's make content snackable and shareable. So all of those strategies that we've learned and deployed in social media, we're now deploying it for the physical world. Let's let the people create our products. Let's let them share our assets with us. So there's a direct correlation between social business and the collaborative economy. What do you think?
What do you think?
Well, you're smart. I want to get your opinion.
I want to talk about that. I definitely think that I would agree with 100% of that, and I want to talk more about it. I want to find out, though, as marketers, what is the biggest challenge that you have when you go to a business that, and I'm sure that they don't all come to you, right? I think you probably have approached some yourself.
Yeah.
What is the biggest challenge you have in helping them wrap their head around this idea? Do they get it?
Yeah. Well, when I was selling this company to the brands a year ago, we launched 11 months ago. I had to explain what the collaborative economy was quite a bit. Now, today, after the insane amount of media attention and focus on this space, I don't have to explain it. They nod their heads. Yeah, you see it. It's coming. I got it. No, I get it. Internet of Things plus social plus mobile apps. I get it. Collaborative economy. So I don't have to explain the movement. They often say no if they don't have time or they don't have budget or they want to go a different direction. I'll share it very openly. Our sales close rate is 40% close. So 60% of the companies I'm pitching are not joining our council. So that's a sign. But it doesn't mean they're not doing anything. But that just gives you some percentage points.
You mentioned earlier the crowdsourcing space, or not crowdsourcing, funding, funding project, crowdfunding, right? And there are many sites where products can get crowdfunded. We've talked about many of them here at TWiT on our network. Cool. And those products are sometimes at the forefront before some really big companies that we expect to come forward with something first. You're seeing them with these people who are inventors, who have great ideas, and they're getting funded for their project, and they're taking over. How are we going to see? And this sounds pretty like impossible, but are we going to see the small entrepreneur eventually wipe out the big, tech giants?
I don't think so. I think everybody has a place. I think let's take a look back at social. So when social media first rose, Tonya, maybe you remember some of the purists in the social media space said, advertising is dead, PR is dead, marketing is dead, TV is dead. It's all about peer-to-peer, pure media, unvetted by no ads. Well, that sure has changed a lot, right?
Right.
Social media press release, Facebook's filled with ads. Bloggers are sponsored now. It's like, really? So what we've seen, though, is a new class of media creator. There's the citizen media that all of us are doing. Everybody here that's listening is probably creating media. And then there's the prosumers, like the professional bloggers. And then there's still mainstream media actors and journalists, although some of them have been hurt by this movement. So that same phase, amateurs, prosumer, and professional is actually already happening in this space as well. So when you take a look at even in the maker space, you have everybody who wants to create goods and crafts maybe at Maker Faire, but maybe the professionals go to tech shop where there's shared tools in San Francisco, a physical location. And then the real pros go to custom made where they're full-time makers and they have backlog of orders. So there's this, and then there's, of course, on top of that, IKEA and, whoever makes jewelry and cars. So it's not or, it's and. We see this new class of people, this empowered people.
Are car manufacturers concerned? I mean, I know you've talked, and I've heard you talk about some of the really big manufacturers, and I would say dealers could be concerned as well. Buying a car is already something that for most people is like once every maybe 10 years, maybe once 3 years, but certainly is not a 5 years. So there's a nice little average there. But it's not something that people purchase every day. And in marketing, I've actually worked with in that industry and talking to them about how to keep customers loyal until it's time to buy again. Now with, things like Lyft and Uber, where people are becoming much more about sharing and less about owning. Are they nervous about this idea? Are they able to adjust?
They are nervous. They come to me now. So before I was having to sell crowd companies, and now the brands are coming. So that's a sign. Some of them are car companies. So some of the stats have been this. Car manufacturers are losing the battle to millennials. That's right. Young folks would rather have a mobile phone because they can access their friends on Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat immediately, or they can summon a ride. So they're losing the battle there. And so there's been a decrease in millennials buying cars. It's actually not cool, right? And there's a focus on sustainability, and they don't have time or they don't have money. They don't have the careers that they were promised. And the mission of Uber and Lyft have been to actually reduce the cost of getting transportation that you don't need a car. Travis from Uber has said that very publicly, that he wants to make it that you don't need to own a car. You just have access to them. And so that's absolutely happening. So here's what car manufacturers are doing. Here's some marketing strategies. One of the earliest deployments was Avis acquired Zipcar, so we already know about that. But also recently Ford, whose disclosure one of our members, they provided discounts to Uber and Lyft drivers to actually buy their cars, a $3,000 discount. That's a lot. And I did the math, $3,000. Wow, what did they get out of that? Oh, it's a test drive or test ride. Let's imagine there's 5 rides per hour times 8 days, 8 hours per day times 5 days. That's a ton of test rides in a brand new Ford car. Now, this actual week, we actually saw an announcement that Fiat partnered with GetAround, which is peer-to-peer car sharing. And so they're actually helping people to share those small cars in San Francisco. And you can actually buy a Fiat, you yourself, Tonya, and rent it out and generate revenue. Your Fiat could actually become revenue profit. It could be net positive for you because it's being rented out and you still get access to it whenever you want. So there's 3 distinct business models and marketing strategies that we're seeing.
Natalie Morris, who's a frequent guest and been a guest on she's not just on Twit, but on Marketing Mavericks as well, has done that sort of car sharing. I don't know. That just makes me nervous. But that it's, it's the future, right? And it's, I remember when I bought my car that I have now, and I was so proud to have it. And people don't have that same affinity towards buying the way that they did, especially since they're sharing even their home, which is probably one of the most intimate of things that we own, right? It's the place where you go to be safe.
Sharing their pooper in their bed.
Oh.
No, really. And Airbnb talks about that. They say, how can we foster that level of trust where you let a stranger come over and use your toilet?
Yeah.
That is the most personal thing that you can do. And they talk about it openly.
This has gone down the drain, so to speak. No, but I mean, but you're right. I mean, when I try to wrap my head around the fact that what I want someone, in my own home, you have that private space that you really don't want anybody to invade, but that's just not how people think anymore. How did we go from, I want this space to be private, and as marketers, how do you market, hey, let me come in and use your bathroom, as you call it?
Right. Well, right now, there's no marketing opportunities around Airbnb. There's only been one deal. Comcast outfitted a few of their top Airbnbs in their areas to look like Game of Thrones or the Boardwalk Empire game. So they turned them into medieval throne rooms. That's the only thing that we've seen out of brands in this space. Concur, which is a travel booking software, they did a partnership with Uber and Airbnb. But other than that, there's been no marketing opportunities that we've seen from traditional brands, at least.
What about Coca-Cola? You've talked about Coca-Cola off the show, and I was doing my show prep, and huge, right? Everybody across the globe knows what Coca-Cola is, and most of us drink it. I'm not going to say who right here. I've got a little Coca-Cola on my desk.
And you have the red background going on too, so well done.
Coke Zero, I know, Coke Zero. We need a little caffeine boost in the morning. I don't drink coffee, so that's what I drink. Or something else. But they've actually gotten into this space too, right?
Yeah, in a couple of different ways, and they're one of our members. So Coke has worked with Owyang, and they've taken recycled Coke bottles and then turned them into 3D printing filament. So you can actually print out things made out of recycled Coke bottles. So that's one of the things that they've done. Another interesting one that came out of the Coke Accelerator, there's an image of it if you're watching online. There's another one called Winolo, Work Now Locally. And they've since spun it out. It's been a success. So Work Now Locally enables Coke customers to become partners. So you've heard of TaskRabbit, where you can have people run errands for you or clean things at your house or do whatever you need. And Coke saw that, and they replicated that same software, Work Now Locally. And the way it works, Tonya, is you download the app, and if you're going to the mall and you have extra time or you're unemployed or you just want to get some extra dollars, you can see if there's any jobs for you at local retailers. And you can identify where the job is, and you go there, you accept the job on the app, and then you go introduce yourself to the general manager, the store manager, and then they'll take you to the back room where the pallets are of Coke products. There it is. And then you can actually stock the fridges and shelves on behalf of Coke. Coke has turned their own customers into partners. And this means that the crowd is impacting supply chain and making sure that the shelves are always properly stocked with Coke things as well. So that's a very innovative play by Coke.
I would agree. They're bringing happiness. Let's talk a bit about, you talked in your honeycomb about services, and there's a couple of areas there. One is, I think, services providing music, maybe a creator of music. Music has been shared. I think that, again, was one of the very first sharing types of economy that, moving from just buying a CD or maybe tuning into MTV back when they actually played music, to actually services like Pandora, which, is a little bit more, on the business angle, but still a startup. And then you've got services like RDO and Spotify. I'm a huge fan of Spotify. I use Spotify all the time, as well as Pandora. And I like to try new music and learn and hear new music that's similar to the music I like. Taylor Swift, who just pulled her music from Spotify, is kind of taking a stand to say this isn't something that I think is good to share. I would disagree. But it's still a space where we're trying to understand, are musicians getting paid the way that they should? And as creators of content, are they getting reimbursed when you've got sharing platforms that are, maybe I heard a song for the first time on Spotify and I wouldn't have been interested in it if somebody hadn't shared it with me. What is happening in the space of music and services like Spotify and RDO and that sort of thing?
It's related to this. I must confess, Tonya, I'm looking more at the physical world than media and software, because I was trying to make that clear distinction as we shift to this next phase. But I think the business model trend is overall that getting things are, and I'm going to quote Jeremy Rifkin, are zero marginal cost. You want to get media, peer-to-peer or streaming for free. You want to get homes, another home to stay in, you can use home exchange at no cost. And so it's very cheap and inexpensive, if not free, for us to get anything that we need from other people. So it requires creators and brands and marketers to shift their business model to having a different value add. And so many of artists have shifted their business models to offering paraphernalia or an apparel, and then concerts, of course, they have to change and offer premium music as well. So I think the jury's still out on whether Taylor has done the right thing or not. I think sales over a quarter or two will help indicate what that is. But we've seen this battle before. Remember when Napster came out and then Metallica got on stage and said, no, this is wrong. And what happened is we saw a new player emerge and capitalize completely on that and create a legal Napster. And that's called iTunes.
Which, again, this is as consumers we're trying to keep up, as marketers we're trying to understand. So you've got things, again, like cryptocurrency and shared office space and driving in cars that are not yours and trusting people with your home. And even in the food space, what we're consuming isn't necessarily from a trusted source, at least not a traditional source. Right, a traditional source. There's all kinds of, people cooking for you or people come into your home, which was kind of a novelty at some point, but now is totally different. Inviting people into your house again. Back in when people were farming and that was normal. They invited people in the community into their home. But now we eat out. We have food delivered or we get fast food. And now it's going back to a previous time when things were simpler, right?
When last names, surnames actually meant something, right? Cook, Fisher, Smith, Owyang. Okay, scratch the last one. But
Paul, I don't know about that.
I don't. You let me know. But that's when surnames meant your profession, and this is what was passed down to you from your mother and father. And now we're returning to some of that, where people are these micro entrepreneurs of yesteryear.
Thanks for listening to my conversation with Jeremiah Owyang. And we are going to hear more about this entire change of the way that we do business, the sharing economy. But I want to thank another sponsor of Marketing Mavericks, which is FreshBooks. Get a fresh start to 2015 with FreshBooks, the easiest way to invoice clients, organize expenses, and track your time. With FreshBooks' award-winning mobile apps, you can do it all from anywhere on your Android or iOS devices. Create invoices online in mere minutes, snap photos of receipts right from your phone, and get real-time business reports with just 2 clicks. I wish I knew about FreshBooks when I was starting out because it would have made my life so much easier. It was very difficult being a business owner, trying to keep up with invoices, who you've sent an invoice to, who's paid. I wanted to do more of the creative stuff, less of the accounting stuff. Well, FreshBooks makes it so that you can do that. You can get paid an average of 5 days faster, and they have the ability to allow you to use multi-currency. So if you do business, you sell products or you have clients across the globe like I did, you can actually bill in any currency. And you can record billable hours or track your team's time with multiple rates. Lots of features. It makes it so easy. In fact, one of the clients, John Swee, a photographer, says, FreshBooks is easy to work with and easy to learn. When I started, I loved that I could just jump right in. Well, they do make it that easy. Try FreshBooks for free for 30 days, no obligation. Go to freshbooks.com/mm and enter Marketing Mavericks in the How Did You Hear About Us section when signing up. Start your 30-day free trial today. Go to freshbooks.com/mm. And don't forget to enter Marketing Mavericks in the How Did You Hear About Us section. And we thank FreshBooks for their support of Marketing Mavericks. So what's the next phase? What's the next big attention getter? Is it media? I mean, what is it?
Right now, I think, and I'd love to chat with I know there's a very sophisticated audience listening here on Twit that gets technology. So a few months ago, Uber launched an API. And they had 8 partners. And the way that the API provides access to get data on how fast a car can get to you and route and a schedule. And so that's the very first steps. So United, Starbucks, and Hyatt have partnered with Uber to get that API, including 5 other startups. Eventually, Uber will open that up more, so maybe there's permissions, and then you can see ratings and reviews of the riders and drivers from these other systems, and that might start to integrate to allow for local retail delivery. So that could be the next play. Now, since Uber launched their API, their arch competitor, Lyft, really has no choice but to do it as well. If not, then the other players are going to suck up all of the API, and then Uber would become the standard. Now, if Lyft launches an API, it means Airbnb must go next. They can't let the car players outmaneuver them. And so you see this API war emerge. Now, if you remember in 2007, we saw the same thing. Remember Facebook F8 platform? Mark Zuckerberg stood on stage and said, let's colonize the world. And now we saw MySpace and Twitter and then LinkedIn launch APIs, and there's a whole app war from Slide and RockU and then Zynga and beyond. So that's about to happen again. The APIs are going to burst a new ecosystem of growth that we haven't seen before. History is repeating.
Well, this leads to my next question then, which is who's going to be left behind? What industry or what mentality in an industry is going to actually fade away?
I think it's the companies that are not willing to change their business model. And this is not just about marketing change or communications change. That was the last phase, social media, right? Social media disrupted corp comm, PR, and customer care and legal. Now this phase is disrupting true revenues and business models. So it means there's even more change that has to happen in companies. It's a significant change. It means they have to partner with the crowd and develop new business models where the crowd is your partner. So that's the bigger change. So all companies must change. We're already seeing, actually, if you can pull up this on my blog, there you can just search collaborative economy timeline. I'm tracking all of the brands and the marketers who have deployed in this market. And there's over 100 case examples of brands that are trying to shift and experiment into this space. I can just recite from any number of the sectors in the honeycomb what different brands are doing. But in most cases, their business model change.
It's very, we've got the graph pulled up here, the timeline, and where things, you've got 1938. You go back a long ways there, sir.
Well, I wasn't around then, just to be clear, but that was one of the first companies that
REI.
made it. did a co-op. So they're sharing ownership with their own customers. But most of the deployments, by the way, are in the last 2 years, and we're seeing an increase in frequency. But these are only big brands that are on this timeline. So there's been a lot done in the space, maker movement, crowdfunding, and sharing, quite a bit. Companies are making, like, for example, BMW is enabling people to rent their brand new cars. That's a pretty big change, right? Nokia, that one right there, they saw people were 3D printing out their own cases for phones, so they enabled them. They gave them the actual STL file and said, why don't you print out the real one? And that's a big change, right? So look at H&M right there. They enable people to swap. So you bring in your old clothes, and then you get a gift certificate for new clothes. That's part of like swapping, sharing, recycling, upcycling. So there's just a ton of examples of brands that are leaning forward, and I just want to provide some kudos to those who are leaning forward to make changes here. This is a significant change in the way we do business.
Anybody that's, one of the things that came up in the chat room were service contracts and protection and who's going to back up the quality of the service or product that we're purchasing. We have seen this kind of thing with eBay, and anybody that's ever purchased anything or maybe had a bad experience on Craigslist has felt this kind of twinge of, who's going to protect me? What do we need? What kind of legislation, if any, should be passed? And should the government be involved in this evolution?
Mm-hmm. The government should be involved to protect people, public property, and businesses. And they are starting to move forward. So San Francisco, obviously, which is market one, where a lot of this is happening, the startups are there, is a precursor, a canary of what is about to happen to other cities. So Airbnb and SF, they have legalized Airbnb, but people can only rent out their rooms, as I understand it, up to 90 days per year. So there's a cap on it. It just can't be a revolving door disrupting your neighbors. And the Airbnb hosts are now paying hotel tax to the city, 14%. So you can see how the government is getting in, because there's a regulation, safety standards, and there's taxable revenues that are being shared back. Now, it's not even in all places, but that's just an example of what's starting to happen. Even the ride-sharing companies have rebranded themselves. They don't call themselves taxis. They don't call themselves on-demand rides either. They call themselves transportation network. Is it carrier? It's TNC. I forget what the last C is. But in some cases, they're actually positioning themselves as just apps, communication apps, so they can shy away from regulation. I think that's probably a mistake in the long run. You want to lean forward and work with government so we can standardize and normalize this within our economy.
How does the sharing and crowdsourcing, how do this evolution in the way that we are purchasing and using products and services affect social media like Facebook and, Pinterest, which is one of my favorite? How does that, how do those play together?
So this movement, and I did a research report, if you wanted to pull it up, it's called Sharing is the New Buying. Sharing is the New Buying. You just Google that. And we found there was a strong correlation, perhaps a causation. I don't know if I can go that strong right now. If you use social media, you are very likely to use the collaborative economy. Duh, right? We kind of knew that. So you could see this as the next phase. Now, with that, even Airbnb, there it is right there, and you can download it yourself. There's respondent data from 90,000 people. This is the largest study ever in this market, US, UK, and Canada. And we found that folks are using these tools around 5 to 7% last year. And this year, 2014, it's around 12 to 15% for these new behaviors of online adults 18 and over. My background is research at Altimeter Group and then Forrester. I was an analyst there, so research is no stranger. So with that said, there's integration as well. Social media is integrating. So we talked about how Facebook Connect is connected to Airbnb. And ratings and reviews are available on Uber, Lyft, and Airbnb, and crowdfunding and beyond. So it's tied. They're all tied. This is one continuum moving forward as we move from media to the physical world.
What about, we kind of touched on cryptocurrency and money in general, and you've got your traditional banks, you've got credit, we've got now you can just, your phone, we're making it easier and easier to buy things. But then there's this idea of using, like Bitcoin, for example. Have you bought anything with cryptocurrency?
I have some Bitcoin, but I have not purchased anything with it. Frankly, it's really confusing, and there's a lot of steps that you have to do. So I'm cloud hashing right now, which means I'm generating Bitcoins as a service online, cloud hashing, and then I have a Coinbase account where I'm going to put them in there and try to buy. But it's just not easy. But with PayPal announcing that they will accept Bitcoin, maybe it will become easier in the future. But right now, it's very confusing. Like, I've seen the videos on how there's Bitcoin ATMs and there's a cafe where you can buy things in Bitcoin. There's like 5 to 6 steps. Really? I mean, I know why people want to do this. The libertarians are leading the charge on saying, like, let's avoid banks and traditional federal government currencies. I understand why they're doing this, but it's just not yet mature, but it will be.
It will be. And I think this is probably, of all of the areas, the most difficult for people to wrap their heads around, because you made a really good point. It isn't easy yet. I mean, because even companies like Overstock.com, which I love, and they're great. And Patrick Byrne is brilliant in his insights, and he's super into this financial space. He wants to cover, I don't know if he's done it yet, but he wants to create his own cryptocurrency. It's a very exciting thing, but I think we're just not, as consumers, ready, because it's not easy. And I think everything that we've talked about has been about making it easier as consumers to buy and participate.
Button, right? So Uber, you push like 2 buttons, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you have a car in front of your house. That's pretty easy, and it's cashless, and there's no credit card transaction. It's all done in the back end. You just get a receipt and you rate the driver. So that's seamless commerce right there. So we should expect that Uber will roll out. They're already doing food delivery, Uber Rush, and also experimenting with delivering from retail locations. So you can imagine what's coming next with this. Tonya, speaking of this, there's another trend that's related to that. It's called the on-demand economy. There's a rise of that meme in just the last month. So people are using that phrase. So the Uber for X, the Uber for Y. We're hearing about this over and over. There's even new VC accelerators in SF called the Next Juggernaut that's just funding companies that just do that. So there's the Next Juggernaut. So we're seeing a big push just on ease of access to goods instead of owning them in the traditional way.
Well, Jeremiah, you're giving me a reason to have you come back and talk about that in more detail. You do some really interesting research. You speak all across the globe, and you're always meeting with different businesses on the big brand side and the startup side. And I'm always trying to follow you and what you're doing. If somebody wants to follow your work, if they want to check out what you're doing, or maybe they want to become a part of your collaboration, what's the best way they can do that?
Yeah, thank you so much. You can quickly, I'm fortunate that SEO-wise, I'm the only Jeremiah Owyang in the world. So it's easy to find me online, and you'll find my Twitter account and then my blog and then my company, crowdcompanies.com, and you'll find my contact info on any of those sites. So I'm very easy and accessible to find.
Am I following you on Pinterest? I don't know. Are you a pinner?
I'm not a big pinner. Not a big pinner.
They were Facebooking about that this morning, about the male-female difference. I'm a big pinner. I like Pinterest. But I really appreciate it. And again, I'm interested in checking out some of these sharing businesses that I haven't actually checked out before. Because of you, I know about them. Thanks again for joining us on this episode of Marketing Mavericks, and we'll be following you.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. That was Jeremiah Owyang, and he is all about being a leader in this very interesting space of sharing. And I'm a big fan, and I'm super glad that we were able to get him on this episode. And if you want to check out his stuff, you can. We're going to post links to his site as well as his Twitter and his social media. But if you want to follow Marketing Mavericks and appreciate all of our guests, or maybe you have a suggestion for somebody that you would like to see on Marketing Mavericks, we want to hear from you. And I love reading your emails and your insight. And I do respond. For those of you who email, they know that. You can email me at mavericks@twit.tv. I want to hear about the topics you want, and I want your feedback on the shows. You can follow me on social media. Go to @TonyaHallRadio on Twitter. Maybe find me on Facebook, and invite me to groups that you have. I'm happy to join. Everybody, thanks again for tuning in to this episode of Marketing Mavericks. We'll be back same time next week. Have a great day.